Good evening. It's Monday, September 23rd, 2013. I would like to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. Before I jump to the agenda, I would like to first recognize three new commissioners that have joined us. Commissioner Alec Bartrasov, welcome. Commissioner Ara Kirkjan, and Commissioner Armando Gonzalez. Really looking forward to working with you and making this commission a productive one. So let's go on. First item on the agenda.
Item 1A, roll call. Commissioner Kirkjian. Commissioner Sahakin. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Bartrasov.
Here.
Chairperson Yakubian.
Here. What's the next thing?
Item 1B, flag salute. Chairperson Yakubian.
Please join me in saluting our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, what's the next item on it?
Item 2 is posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, September 23rd, 2013 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, September 20th, 2013 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Good. Next item?
Item 3 is approval of minutes. Item 3A, April 22nd, 2013 regular meeting.
I'm going to go ahead and move to approve these minutes. And we have a second?
If someone else give you a second, one or the other.
Would you care to second that?
I'll second it.
Very good. Okay. Next item?
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
I don't have any speaker cards, so we will move on to the next item.
Item 5 is information only. At 5A is presentation and update, Beeline 101.
Very good. Staff.
Chairperson Yakubian, members of the commission, or new commissioners, I thought since we have 3 new commissioners on the commission, it'd be a good idea to bring one aspect of our operation with a presentation, a comprehensive presentation that Catherine Engel, our transit manager, and her assistant, Silva Bagdanian, have prepared. And I think it'll be beneficial for those of us who know some things about it as a refresher, and for our new commissioners. And if there are any other aspects of our operation that you'd like to find out about in more detail, I'll be more than happy to bring that forward as well.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Galani. Good evening, members of the Commission. We have entitled our program tonight Beeline 101. Probably 101 things you never thought to ask and maybe won't want to remember by the time we're done tonight. We're going to throw a lot of factoids and a lot of information at you. There's no test at the end. So it's really just kind of absorb those pieces that are of interest to you. And as we go through the year, there'll be opportunities when we bring back some studies and some other reports that some of those pieces will tie back in very nicely together. So don't be put off if it's a little bit overwhelming tonight, because we're going to throw everything at you to get kind of a broad picture of what happens with the Beeline. So at your places tonight for reference, there is a Beeline fact sheet for this last fiscal year, and it is the common data that we report on to a lot of our outside agencies. So it has a yellow and it's a one-page sheet. It says facts at a glance. And we'll be going through different parts of that tonight as part of this presentation to give you some background for our financing and how we operate. We also included, even though we're not going to talk about Dial-A-Ride tonight, we included the fact sheet for Dial-A-Ride and a little bit of how that program operates. It's a much smaller program than the Beeline, but it's probably good to know that it exists and have an easy reference point for you. And of course, we can always come back and talk to you more about Dial-A-Ride again in the future. So tonight, we've got, as part of the first steps at Overwhelming You, kind of this list of things we're going to talk about. We're going to, in the first few minutes, while the buses are still operating, we're going to do a little bit of a live demo for NextBus, so you can all practice and see how it works on your devices, whatever you might have brought with you tonight. And then we're going to talk about some of the more mundane things of how transit kind of operates here in LA County and our relationship to our outside agencies, how we're financed, how Beeline fits into the whole regional network of transit here in Los Angeles County. Then we'll talk about our fleet, because our fleet has changed a lot over the last 5 years. We'll bring you up to speed with what we're doing there. We'll talk a little about rider demographics and about the routes and the performance. And this is important to kind of give you a base and idea of kind of where we're at now, because we're going to launch a big study this fall that will come back with more information about updating our demographics and our ridership. So that'll be interesting and kind of put you in the right space to be able to absorb that when that comes back. We're going to talk a little bit about safety and security. So if you're still alive and not, your eyes haven't glazed over, we have some really fun snippets from our safety videos that we'll be sharing, and you can kind of see what the drivers are facing out on the street. So we have a little bit of humor towards the end of the program. And then we'll talk about our major projects that are coming up this fiscal year. So we're pretty busy on a regular basis, and we'll kind of show you everything that we're doing. So this is meant to be a real interactive kind of a program. So as we're talking about things, if I talk in transit speak, say, stop, what does that mean? Or if you have a question about an item we're talking about, please jump in. So it's relevant to that conversation. Don't hold your questions for the end. It's much more interactive how we have this set up tonight. Okay, with that, we're going to have Silva try and show us a little bit about our real-time performance. So go ahead and, while she's flipping over to the, we're going to show you, for the most part, how people or how folks got to know our Glendale Beeline real-time bus arrival program. It started out, we were one of the first agencies that started using it in about 2003, and it's really morphed over the years to be internet friendly, but also PDA friendly, iPod friendly, tablet friendly. You can put an app on your phone now, and we've got some new things we're working on right now to make it even better and easier to use. So with that, Silva will show us NextBus.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a very brief demonstration. There's actually two ways to get to NextBus. I have gone in through nextbus.com. However, if you are on our Glendale Beeline website, you can also click on the link and it will take you also to NextBus. We're going to start by selecting your transit system. We're going to go to Glendale Beeline. And we can select any route. As you can see, you have options of selecting the route that you want to get information about. In this instance, I'm going to click on route number 32. This is one of our later running routes. And I am going to be, actually I want to go southbound. And I'm at Glendale and Broadway, which is where I want to be. And my destination, I can always click on, which means this is going towards the Glendale Galleria when it says Broadway Jackson. As you can see, it's giving me a prediction of 36 minutes. This is for Route 32. However, as you can see on the bottom right here, it is also giving me predictions for Route 3, which is another alternative I can take to get to my destination. And we would demonstrate our live map version to you today, but unfortunately we ran into some technical difficulty. This computer doesn't have Java installed, and you needed to bring up the map. So by all means, whenever you have a chance, take a moment, go through the system, look at our live map, because that's rather interesting too. It will show you where all the buses are actually located and as they're going through the routes. And thank you. Any questions?
So you'll notice Silva was going through the online version, and there's a little red cell phone that's sitting there to the right. This system is really cool. If you always take Route 3 to go to work or go home or go down to the train station, if you're on a Route 1 or 2, it will remember what route you use, and it will come up automatically on your office computer, if that's the case, to the place that you most often use. Every bus stop now has a bus stop number. So once you know your bus stop number, you don't have to go through the whole process of going online and finding out what the time is. You could actually use your cell phone or a PDA device and put in the number for the bus stop, and it'll give you your same predictions just like it did on here. So if any of you brought your handheld devices with you, you are welcome to test it out and see if it works. Those of you that have a regular phone, you can call 511. And 511 will prompt you, which is the state transportation system phone number. 511 will ask you, what city are you in? And you just say Glendale. What transportation provider would you like? Glendale Beeline. Where is your location? What bus stop are you at? You would say Glendale and Broadway. And it will give you a voice message that tells you your next bus is in 33 minutes. Or your next 2 or 3 buses, if there's a number of buses queued up. Again, we're at the end of the service day, so most of the buses are starting to disappear off of the system. If you have a smartphone, there are people out there that have made apps to go on your phones. Nextbus and Beeline don't have their own app, but there's apps out there that you can download and do the same process. So is there anyone... The buses do not preempt the schedules. We don't have signal preemption system installed here in Glendale. They've looked at it, and I think because of the nature of the way our streets are set up and the signal timing and the Caltrans signals versus our signals, that it wasn't a very effective use of technology. We didn't. The information is not at the bus stops like this, but one of our projects we're working on this year is to actually put the stop number on the bus stop sign. We're replacing all of the bus stop signs. So if you're at the stop, you can just put in your bus stop number and get your information.
Commissioner. Grand Boulevard.
Well, let me.
Sorry about that.
Commissioner, this is supposed to be interactive. So, Commissioner, Council, or Member Chairman Yagobian and Commissioner Sahakian, we have some real-time displays at GTC and at some of the shelters on Brand Boulevard. They are very, very expensive to operate because we have to pay real-time communications, whether or not there's anybody there or whether or not the buses are running. So it's a very expensive proposition for us. Since NextBus has changed its software and we have the capacity now to use it on a real-time basis with handheld devices, we're skipping that installation of those items at the bus stops. Frequent riders know what the cycle for the schedule is for the most part, so anyone who's not familiar with it can either pick up a schedule on board every bus or can do it from the bus stop sign that gives them different ways to be able to call in, either call in or text in to get their information. In our last survey, we had quite a number of people that were already using handheld devices 5 years ago, so we think that number has really increased, and we'll know that this fall when we do the survey again of most riders having smartphones or having some sort of handheld device.
I have a question. So I really like the NextBus service, and I think it's very helpful for people that know which route that they want to use. But I, for example, use Google Maps when I'm using public transit, and I find that Beeline is not on the Google Maps service. So is there an opportunity for us to integrate Beeline into Google Maps services?
Actually, Madam Chair and Commissioner Bartosoff, we are on Google Maps. At least as of yesterday, I was on Google Maps. It's something we've done this last year, is to be loaded on the Google process. It was a very time-consuming process to do all of the data to put on there because they don't program it. We had to do that. So we are on, so you can actually see our stops. It's not as robust as NextBus because it runs off an algorithm program to guess when the bus is going to be there, where NextBus is actually pinging live time and is probably a 30-second difference with what that expectation is for the bus arrival. So the NextBus will be a little bit more accurate, but Google Maps will have both of our stops or shared stops with Metro and the arrival times. Okay. With that, we're gonna swap and. There are a number of ways to get the real-time information. One is online. The second is by texting. And then by phone, you can call the 511 and go through the queues to get that information. And then smartphones, most people have an app, the same thing that you would get live off the website. And you can see a little precursor to our next added events for this fiscal year. We're looking at new Beeline signs that would provide you that information at the bus stop for each of the stops. If you notice, our Beeline signs are pretty, if they are still out there, are pretty ratty. And so we're looking at totally bringing everything up to date to make it ADA accessible with the information that's on there, and then also give people, which days of the week the routes are running. Because we're not 7 days a week for every route here in town. So we're hoping that there's enough information with the signs to help those people that aren't as familiar with the system. So now I want to head into kind of the big overall background of how transit here in LA County works. I always tease people at work that we have many masters. As a transit system, we are answerable to everybody and their brother for lots of different reasons and regulations. We always say follow the money. So if we get $1 from any agency, all the rules that are connected to that agency apply then to the Beeline. So we have received federal funding for our bus fleet, and as a result, we need to comply with 26 different areas of program, everything from civil rights to having continuing capacity to operate the system, to not doing school bus service, not operating charter service, how we deal with Indian tribes if we were in that area. We don't have that, but those folks running transit in San Bernardino County do. So we have a very regimented and very robust program that the Federal Transit Administration lays on us. And we've just completed about 6 different audits with them for the end of the fiscal year: drug and alcohol, our finances, our service, miles, hours, passenger counts. So it's pretty extensive. We're now just completing a review with the FTA on our civil rights program, which has been a labor of love, and they've just updated the regulations, so we have one more round of implementation that we need to do with them. We're also governed here in California by the California Department of Transportation, an area of Caltrans, their local transportation division, their mass transit division. We also get inspected by CHP. So once a year, CHP comes out, reviews our fleet, reviews our facility, and we have to meet their satisfactory requirements in order to keep our buses on the road. They also govern some of our regulations as far as how much fare we charge. They require a 20% fare box return. And so in the last few years, we've increased our fares to try to meet that requirement. And we're about 18.6% of our operating costs now come from fares. Then we have another layer with Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. We're probably most familiar with them because they do everything with our streets, roads, and transit programs. And we have lots of construction going on around the county right now that is under the auspices of Metro. They have a very robust funding program that we participate in that's called the Call for Projects, and that's mostly where we get our federal funds for our bus replacement, but also some operating funds that are discretionary to the local transit systems. And then we have City of Glendale, who thinks it is their beeline system, but in the pecking order of things, makes a lot of our local policy, but we're as beholding to the other regulatory agencies as we are to the policymakers here in Glendale. Tying to those agencies that regulate us is also kind of how the money flows. The City of Glendale does our budget every year, but all of the budget pieces for our funding come from outside agencies. We do not have any general fund money in the transit system. It is all dedicated transit tax. Most of it is flows through Metro as the programming agency. They are the metropolitan planning organization, kind of like how SCAG is in other areas. But they take on that role of how money gets programmed here in LA County and how much of it and what kinds of money travel to the transit systems. Money that comes from California Department of Transportation, we get in lieu funds for that. We don't actually get state TDA money, but we have all the state TDA requirements as a part of that pass-through. And then, of course, we get the discretionary funds from Metro that really come from FTA. Usually they are congestion management air quality funds. People will hear that called CMAQ funding, which is a flexible fund that is most often right now used for purchasing transit buses here in Los Angeles County. What is interesting about Glendale Beeline is we are considered a local transit system. And in Los Angeles County, there are different layers of transit systems. We have the regional service, which is rail service typically, and then the bus service. So of the regional operators, there are 16 in LA County. They are directly allocated funds from the FTA or from the state. And they also receive local funds, but they receive a bigger variety of funds and a larger amount of funding at that regional level. Most of those transit agencies have been around since the 20s and 30s. So on the west side, you might know Big Blue Bus from Santa Monica, Culver City Bus, in the South Valley, Montebello Bus Lines, or Norwalk Transit. They've all been around for many years before there was an RTD and before there was a Metro. So they're grandfathered in as having reserved service areas. So if you go down to Long Beach, the only buses you will see, except on Long Beach Boulevard, are Long Beach Transit buses, because that service area is reserved to to Long Beach Transit, to that one particular transit agency. Metro then is the result of the merging of RTD and the Los Angeles Transportation Commission back in the 90s, and it runs most of the other county-wide service. So really the long-haul service that goes from San Bernardino County all the way out to the west side, all the big rail operations, whether it's light rail or the subway system, comes out of Metro. So Glendale Beeline's kind of an interesting little system. We are the largest of the local transit operators and in the mid-size of the regional operators, but our funding sources are very, very different.
Can I ask you another question, please? I don't see Measure R money anywhere.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Sahakian, in fiscal year 13, we did not spend any Measure R for the transit system. In fiscal year 12, we did about $3 million. Measure R local return is a new funding source for us, so we're trying to be smart about how we spend that. For fiscal year 14, we are using Measure R local return as the capital match for our new transit facility that we hope to get underway, and also for bus purchases.
So we are aggressively going after Measure R funding.
Okay, so let me clarify then. Measure R, as similar to Proposition A and Proposition C funds, has many different components to it. So there is a local return component on each of those three funding systems, it's alphabet soup, A, C, and R. That local return portion comes back by formula to the city, and it's up to the city how to spend it within the regulatory guidelines. For Measure R, there's also Regional Measure R, which is already predetermined for how many different regional projects have been submitted and approved, and that's part of the same ordinance, but a different piece of the money. So Mr. Galanian and his staff in traffic and the other transportation staff will go after discretionary Measure R dollars for new projects, but the regional dollars right now are still, I think, pretty well programmed for that 30-year time span. And then the local return, we have the discretion of how we use it. Right now, we're trying to bank it to do the big capital projects. So we totally made soup out of everything we've talked about so far. The funding gets very, very complicated. In that Glendale Beeline is what we call a local return system. It uses Proposition A and Proposition C, which are local LA County sales taxes that are dedicated to transit. It's 1/4 cent per dollar sales tax that directly comes to the transit systems. Part of that is that local return that comes to us. So it's a couple $1 million a year in each of those funds that flows through. So when sales tax revenue goes down, which is what we were dealing with the last few years, and we made some cutbacks, it's a direct, the money we have is a direct result of the sales tax that is generated here locally in LA County. And we get our percentage and our share of that. The other transit agencies, again, have a larger pot of money that is they are direct recipients from those funding organizations. So with that, we thought we'd give you kind of a snapshot of where we are with revenue and expense for last fiscal year. We're in the process of our final reporting for last year, and it's on your cheat sheet, but we did a little pie chart to kind of show you the pieces of what our funding is. You'll see the largest revenue we have is local return. We get a question a lot of time about our fares, and especially with the fare increases for the last couple of years of, oh gosh, we must be swimming in money, and don't the fares pay for the Beeline system? And you'll see when we add in the capital costs, the fares only paid for 14% of what it cost to operate last year. Now again, this includes capital numbers in here, so it's closer to 18% if the capital is pulled out and we're just looking at operating costs. Some of our revenue comes from us selling our service. We sell transit service to LA County, and we also sell service to City of La Cañada, Flint Ridge. The City of La Cañada, we'll talk about the fleet in a minute, owns 2 buses that they give to us to operate their service. The rest of the service we do with our regular Beeline fleet. The rest of the money is discretionary money that we go after and from year to year try to get our hands on some external money at the regional level in order to balance our budget. On the expense side...
Excuse me, I have a question on the revenue side, please.
Yes.
Is any of this revenue side that you've just mentioned, is there any prediction of any of that being lost in the near future?
Chairman Yacobian and Commissioner Gonzalez, there are a couple of pieces of money that are discretionary, and right now the way that the county works, we have a year-to-year agreement. As long as there is money in what we call a growth over inflation fund that is generated by that Proposition A ordinance, then we receive about $700,000. If at some point that growth over inflation pot of money is not generated, then we do have to go back to the Metro Board and seek out and request that some other funding comes in to subsidize that program. We have had that money for 3 years. We're on the 4th year on a year-to-year agreement at this point. So that's our most, that's the part that is in jeopardy the most out of this funding pot. And that would be part of that Prop A discretionary piece of money that you see on the slide.
Thank you.
When we report our expenses to our federal regulators each year, we divide them up into 4 areas: operations, vehicle maintenance, administration, and non-vehicle maintenance, and then capital. And you'll see the non-vehicle maintenance is a very tiny sliver. They segregate out communications maintenance and fare box maintenance as being non-vehicle related because there are extra pieces added on to the buses. And they're trying to track those costs. So in a rail system, it would be all of the operating signals and communication systems for the trains. In the bus side, we don't have as much infrastructure for that non-vehicle maintenance. It also includes facility maintenance. We have such a, you'll see our facility pictures later, we have such an outdated facility that it's not much to maintain it. We're not putting much expense or energy into that currently. But you'll see on our operating expenses that operations is the biggest chunk of the pie. That's because that's really the cost for labor to have the bus operators drive the buses. Most of our expense is actually on the road with service on the road. And then the next highest, in this case, is capital because we bought 4 buses last year. But otherwise, it would be maintenance. So our top 2 pieces are really maintenance and operations that actually keep the system running. And I would just put a note up there, our fares. At this point, our cash fares were at $1. We've grown very rapidly from the 25-cent fare in a couple of years to that $1 fare. And we rescinded the next fare increase, which was going to be to $1.25 this last July. But with the economy, we had the council cancel that fare increase. We're just keeping it at $1, and hopefully the system will stabilize with that. So you'll hear a lot of transit agencies always talk about what your average cash fare is. What are your cash fares? Because that's a federal requirement to actually publish cash fares on board the buses. You can do whatever you want to with passes and rider cards and different things, but the bottom line is always what are you posting as your cash fares for your system. So you'll hear us talk about that. So our average fare is 62 cents.
On the vehicle operation expense, how many % of that is fuel?
Trying to think of our fuel. The fuel is actually fairly small. We are CNG fueled, and our fuel costs per gallon are really low. Silva, who is our data reporter.
Sorry, I don't have the dollar figure.
How many gallons? Okay. I was going to try and do some mental math here. The CNG usage last year was about 292,000 gallons, and we're paying about $1.50 per gallon for that fuel. Diesel, we were at the very end of our diesel buses last year, about 7,000 gallons, and that's about $4 a gallon. So our fuel costs in comparison to the driver costs is much smaller. But we can come back and give you that breakdown.
Excuse me, Catherine, I had a question. How much fluctuation do you see, maybe on a year-to-year or every couple years, with the ANC, Prop ANC returns? Because looking back on the last assessment that was done in 2008, 2009, there's a significant drop in the revenue received from ANC from then. So I'm just curious to know, is that a trend? Is that something that is there a range of what you can expect to receive or not receive? And that seems like a significant drop from 2008-9.
Chairman Ecobian, we rely on the UCLA. I'm trying to think of what the name of it is. It's the forecasting agency that comes out of UCLA Anderson School. And they try to take a look at all of the parameters here in Los Angeles County to try and guesstimate what that impact to sales tax revenue is going to be here in LA County. They've been about 5% higher than what our actual returns have been probably over the last 5 or 6 years. So we knew in 2008 that the recession had hit, and so we know quarterly here in Glendale of what those tax receipts are. And so we can see that impact fairly quickly. There's about a 6-month lag on the data that comes back in, but we can start to see those receipts fall off. And then you look at the economy, and then you look at the UCLA forecast and say, okay, how long is that trend going to happen? And that's what really spurred us into a previous discussion with the previous commission a couple of years ago, saying our sales tax revenue has dropped $2 million. And since that is our largest operating money, that we needed to tailor the service to reflect that income that we had. And made a lot of hard choices, both with the fare increase and with really kind of downsizing and right-sizing some of the routes. We are seeing an increase this year. It's not to the levels we were back prior to 2008, but it has increased this year, and so we're on target for our budget, but we don't have that huge growth where we say, okay, let's put all the service back on Route 3 that we'd cut 2 years ago.
And what was that? Because the total operating costs now versus then is actually less.
Yes.
So I'm going to attribute that to reduction in the service. And how much of a reduction has there been? I mean, is there a way that you could quickly answer without having that information in front of you? Sorry.
I don't have that factoid with me, but we significantly cut. We went from about 92,000 hours to our hours this year to 78,000, about 79,000 hours. So a chunk of hours, 10,000 hours.
Okay.
And we tried to really select, when we did that downsizing, select the least, the routes that would have the least impact on the least amount of riders. So we were very selective in trimming times of the day or frequency, or try not to eliminate any service to anyone, but maybe not having as frequent of services would have been nice in other ways.
Right. Thank you.
So with that, we'll talk a little bit about service then. I mentioned earlier that LA County has 16 regional operators. We have an additional about 15 or so local transit operators. And the intent was that in the late 80s and early 90s, when LA County approved the Proposition A and Proposition C transit taxes, was that we would kind of fill in the gaps locally with feeder service to try to get to those regional services, so that it was a little bit more cost effective on a local level to run some little transit systems that would then feed in people to both the rail or to Metro's long haul service. And that's how those two kind of groups grew in the late 80s and early 90s. And has resulted in what we have today. We've kind of stabilized since the mid-90s with the number of transit systems that we have. And you'll see on our map here that the pink routes are all Metro routes. The other blue routes are B-line routes. And then there's a couple of purple routes. Mostly, if you look down the 2 freeway, is an LA DOT commuter express route that stops in Glendale. And then Pasadena Arts connects with us up at JPL. But in Glendale, our regional service would be Metro, and our local transit service would be B-Line. And to kind of give some context of who's out there, these are the regional transit operators, the ones that are directly funded from both the federal and the state agencies. And you'll see Glendale kind of there in the middle in the darker purple. We operate equivalent to a number of those regional transit systems. So our system is pretty robust. When you look at the passengers we carry per hour and the types of many hours that we have on the street and the types of buses that we operate and the frequency of our service, we're very similar to a lot of the other regional transit operators. Of course, Metro is the largest, and they actually go off the chart. But you can kind of see the relationship between the others. LA DOT has service that came from RTD back in the days between when RTD was becoming the Metro we know today. Some of the long-haul service, the commuter express service, was taken over by City of Los Angeles. But you'll see other large agencies like Long Beach that have always been an included operator with their own service area. So we have some larger 200-plus bus operating agencies. And everybody else is just kind of regular under 100 bus operations. For the local transit operators, you'll see Glendale Beeline. We are the big boys on campus. We are a third more than LA County, which is a number of agencies, a number of different little systems that are commingled data-wise for their reporting. The next largest operation would be Pasadena then, as far as a local transit system. These are all what we call the Prop A and C, or the local return operators. And some of the agencies run 1 or 2 little shuttle buses in their downtown area, where we are operating more as a regional transit operator in this regard. So it kind of gives you some context of who we are and where we play a role. We wanted to give you an idea also on passenger boardings, because hours don't always tell the full story of how much service or how many people you're really moving. There are a lot of agencies, because of their geography or their local policies, have a lot of service on the street, but there's not a lot of people on their buses. So this tells you passenger boardings. Again, Glendale's going to be the highest of all of the local transit agencies. We have a fairly robust passengers per hour. But you can see the other, again, we kind of overshadow the other local transit agencies around us. So our fleet is 36 buses. The City of Glendale owns 34. City of La Cañada owns 2 and provides them to us to operate. On any weekday in peak service, we have 29 buses on the road. We have 7 spares, and here's an interesting factoid for your next party. The state of California will only allow us to have a 20% spare ratio. And as a small system, it means we only have 7 buses that rotate in and out of preventative maintenance, emergency repairs, getting repainted, putting in new seats. So we are a very lean, mean, effective operating machine to be able to turn buses over and not have a lot of what we call down buses that aren't able to pull out and meet the road either for safety standards or for cleanliness standards. All of our buses, as of last December, are CNG fueled, which is compressed natural gas. We have our own fueling facility in town. We partnered with Clean Energy to build a public fueling facility. So members of the public can fuel their own personal cars. We have a lot of local fleets that are now fueling their corporate fleets at our facility. And then, of course, our buses, which fuel from about 10 o'clock at night until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Let's see. I get asked a lot about why we're using these big buses to go all over town in little old Glendale. Why don't we have those cute little 30-foot buses? You'll see a picture later on that kind of explains why we need the larger capacity for the buses. And our funding sources for the last few years have given us money to buy buses, but only if we increase capacity. So we've gone from 30 and 32-foot buses to 35 and 40-foot buses. It's very difficult right now to buy a 35-foot bus. Very few agencies buy heavy-duty buses that are the shorter buses. What you'll see now on the road are 40s for most agencies, 45s for Metro, and articulated buses, which are 60 feet, which Metro and Santa Monica and Long Beach, some of the larger transit agencies, and Foothill Transit, some of them that are doing larger hauls, longer distance, are using some of the articulated buses. The articulated buses are very expensive to maintain. Those little bellows in the middle don't last a long time, and because we don't have the best pavement in streets other than Glendale. See, I knew he was going to get me. They don't, because of all the movement, they don't last quite as long, and so they've been a kind of a maintenance headache, I know, for Metro. So most of the buses we are buying currently are 40-foot buses. At the end of this year, we will be 100% New Flyer fleet. That helps us out for parts and maintaining our costs for maintenance. All of the mechanics know the fleet, they know the New Flyer product, they know how they're wired. So when you have a small fleet and such a small number of spares, the more similar your buses are to each other, the easier it is to maintain them and have consistency across the board for the quality of the buses and the maintenance.
I have a question. You may have just answered it, but I noticed that it seems like more than half of the fleet will be replaced in a couple of years. Is there any consideration for the CNGs to convert to electric buses? I know that some operators are considering that.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Bartosoff, the electric buses are pretty new for the transit agencies. The larger agencies have a little more capacity to experiment. Long Beach Transit has an order in right now for a handful of electric buses. And Santa Barbara's been running electric buses for a few years. They work really well if they're short distances. They're not a long way from their base facility to recharge, and they're running pretty short days. Right now, we can only have the buses, the heavy-duty buses, can only operate about half of the day before they have to recharge, and they're also very, very expensive right now. So we're going to let everyone else experiment until they find the right combination of propulsion services for the weight of the buses. The buses right now are about 14,000 pounds, so they are heavy, and so it takes a lot to propel them fuel-wise, no matter what your fuel source is, whether it was diesel or the CNG. They're also looking at hybrid or fuel cell buses. Again, they're still in research and development. They put a couple out for experimentation and testing on the road, but they're not mass produced at this point. So I'm thinking it's another 5 years before they're really commercially viable for us to consider. We are in the process of replacing the El Dorado buses. So as of December, everything will be New Flyer. And then we have another bus grant that will replace the next set of buses in 2016, plus our old La Cañada bus. La Cañada received a call for projects to replace their Bluebird bus, and we can't wait. It was a 7-year bus, and here we are at 14 years. It's everything we can do with gum and masking tape and duct tape to keep it together. So we're very grateful that La Cañada was awarded that grant. Our average fleet age right now is a little over 8 years. If we had all the money in the world and all the resources, we would be right around 6. The average age of a bus for a heavy-duty bus is 12 years. And depending on the wear and tear of the bus, what starts to happen with our buses, because they're all lightweight, is the shell of the bus starts to crack. And it's harder to maintain the good looks of the bus. It's still physically able to operate, but all the little component pieces, like the flooring starts to wear, the seats aren't quite as comfortable. So you'll see us running our buses probably 12 to 14, maybe 15 years, because we do really good maintenance. So the engine part stays operating really well, the mechanical pieces, but the looks of the bus start to really fall apart as the bus ages. So we're hoping to keep right around the 7-8 years, as long as the funding is available for us. Now, all of our bus replacement funding, the largest percentage is by a discretionary grant. It's usually federal money that we get through the Metro Call for Projects process. If that were to go away, then we would replace the buses with just all of our local return money. It could be the Measure R we've stored up, but at some point it comes back to us to be able to fund on our own then if we can't get the discretionary grants. We're really excited about our last bus order. We have 4 buses running around town, you'll see, with our new paint scheme on them. We are going to retro paint part of the last 9 buses that we had ordered. They still have a lot of life with them, so you'll see a few buses out there right now running around with purple waiting for the decals to arrive. to be placed on the buses. In December, the best news that we have is that our whole fleet will be low floor. So there's no more getting on to the front of the bus and having to walk up steps. We will be one of the first agencies in LA County to be 100% low floor, which means also that these have ramps instead of lifts. And so the ramp on the right-hand side is a picture of the bus entrance with a ramp. The ramp just folds out. It could be done mechanically with a person or it could be electronically with a bus. But as you walk up to pay your fare, there's no steps, and then you can walk through the first 2/3 of the bus, and there's no steps. The steps are at the very back of the bus over the back wheel wells. So all those people that might have mobility impairments, even if you're not using a wheelchair, but you have other mobility issues, it makes it much easier to board the bus, much faster to board and pay your fare. So we're hoping that this will help to speed up the time it takes. It'll take less time to travel the routes because people will be able to get on and off much faster.
I have a
So we're
question,
excited
please.
about that.
Seeing the visual there, I noticed an absence of where to store bicycles. Is there any program relative to encourage connectivity to bicycle riders in the program?
Yes, Madam Chairman, and Commissioner Gonzalez. On each of our buses, we have a bike rack on the very front.
I see it.
And yes, it is on the top left corner. You might be able to see.
Okay.
It's very small, but it holds two bikes. It folds down when someone wants to load their bikes on the bus, and then folds up if there are no bikes left on at the end of the travel. We have been looking in LA County about doing 3-bike racks. Currently, they're illegal in the state of California. The CHP is not letting us install them. There's a regulation about how long the bus can be, and the bike rack, when it is deployed, is longer than what California Highway Patrol or the state law allows. Right now, when we do our survey this fall, we're going to look at the capacity of the buses to carry bikes. Are there any places where people cannot board the bus with their bike? Where those locations might be? Do we have auxiliary bike racks for them at those locations? And just looking at the demand and seeing if there's anything else we need to do to accommodate that. We've also looked at whether or not we would allow people to board the bus with bikes, and that is problematic. We can't do it during rush hour when the buses are full, and off-peak then it becomes a little bit of a control issue if people can control their bikes, if they don't fold up and they can't have them right in front and control them. So we think at this point we still have capacity for passengers to ride using their bikes. And that we're not really turning away a lot of people, but we'll know better for sure this fall when we do that actual count at stops. Okay, that's it for the...
Just to be clear, so the study in the fall will include the number of bicyclists that board a bus or would like to board a bus?
I'm not sure, Commissioner Bartosoff, if we'll capture everyone that wanted to board the bus with the bike. What we will do is boarding the bikes on and off, so we'll know what stops they're getting on and where they're getting off. If the ride checkers can see that there are other people queued up that wanted to get on with we're hoping that they will note that so we know what that demand is. But it won't be as scientific as the ons and offs and knowing what that load is. Okay, so now we're going back a few years to look at our rider demographics, and this will kind of place into review a little bit of what we're going to be out collecting this fall. So in 2008, when we did our last line-by-line study, and this year we're calling it a route analysis, this is what came back as our typical rider. The rider was female, was probably Latina, came from a household with one or less cars, and could be of any age. We think there's been a big population shift in Glendale in the last 5 years, and so we're looking at this data, the survey that we're doing this fall, to kind of update that data demographics for us. You'll see that in 2008, the Latino and Hispanic were the most frequent riders as far as ethnicity, but we had a pretty good mix of Asian, white non-Armenians, and Armenians that rode with us. Pretty reflective of the population in general. And we think that this will switch a little bit as we do the survey for this next year. I mentioned that the Latina, our average passenger could have been of any age. This is the age breakdown from our last survey. We're serving a really good broad mix of ages, both from seniors to school-age students. And you'll see that where that really kind of fits in when we look at what their trip purpose is. Most of our riders on Beeline ride with us multiple times per week. So we have a good following of folks that we are their transportation system. We're the source of service that they use to get to work and to school. And this was really obvious from our last survey. And then we look at trip purpose, and you'll see the buses during the midday that are fairly empty. Most of our riders are riding in the mornings to school and to work. So you'll see buses with standing room only between the 7 and 8:30 hour, and to the college up until about 9 o'clock. And then the evening, our peak service is really spread out over a larger period of time. Most of the schools, the secondary and high schools, are getting out at around 2 and 3 o'clock. So they'll take the load of the school kids then. The college students are really done 12:30, 1 o'clock in a lot of cases. We get a big load out of GCC at that time. And then we have the 5 to 7 o'clock work traffic that comes in. So in the mornings, you'll see us busting at the seams. It'll be quiet during the middle of the day on some of the routes, and then all afternoon, you'll see that the buses are fairly busy with ridership.
Let me ask you, what does number 1847 represent? And the prior, on where it says rider age, the number was 2657. What does the numbers represent?
Those were the numbers of surveys that were returned from the onboard surveys that were given out to the passengers during our last study that answered those questions.
What number of passengers then?
Right. Or the number of survey respondents at that point. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is where we are with ridership and the routes, because I think this is an interesting piece of information. Folks always think we have the highest ridership in downtown Glendale. And that is not accurate for the numbers we have. And the numbers from 2008 and the numbers from 2013 are very similar. Our highest ridership route is Route 3, or the combination of 3 and 31 and 32, mostly because it serves the downtown core and it serves Glendale College. So you're serving both those work and school trips. Route 4 does a lot of service all through the day. It does a lot more shopping and a lot more interconnectivity in a very dense, transit-dependent section of our city, and you'll see that as we look at the route maps. Route 5 serves Hoover High School and the Pacific Edison facility. And then if you look at Route 1 and Route 2, you'll see where the passengers per hour and the kind of the ranking. Routes 1 and 2 are interlined, which means a Route 1 becomes a Route 2, and they kind of circulate around the 5 buses all day long. And depending upon whether the driver signed on correctly or not, the data will be captured either as a Route 1 or a Route 2 bus. So in actuality, the Route 2 bus probably has a little bit more ridership, and the Route 1 probably has a little bit less. So you can almost move those two a little bit closer together. But you'll see they're not our number 1 and number 2 or number 3 routes in our system. Route 6 and 7 serve both high schools. Route 6 serving Glendale High School, Route 7 serving Hoover and GCC. 11 and 12 are what we call our commuter routes. Route 11 goes from the train station up into central part of Glendale, and the Route 12 service runs from GTC west to the Grand Central campus, the Grand Central corridor along San Fernando Road, and to the Burbank train station. What's interesting about Route 12 is Metrolink has different fare sets depending on where you're coming from in the county. So if you're coming from Antelope Valley, you live in Lancaster or Palmdale, you can ride to Burbank for one fare, and if you ride to Glendale, it's an extra $40. So people coming south or coming from the Ventura line get off in Burbank to Glendale. People that are coming from Orange County or Riverside that come through Union Station come north to Glendale to try and keep their Metrolink fares as cheap as they can. So that's one of the reasons we serve both the Glendale and the Burbank train stations. We have both those rider groups coming to Glendale, mostly in that Grand Central corridor for work.
Excuse me, why don't we serve Bob Hope Airport? That's because it's because in Burbank, or because there's no demand?
Commissioner, the service for Glendale is mostly focused on connecting people in Glendale to the larger routes. So we only circulate within Glendale for the most part, unless other people are buying service from us, which means we're running up to the North County area and to La Cañada. But we're not providing service for the city of Burbank. So that would be something that Metro would do or Burbank Bus would do.
But most Glendale people utilize Burbank Airport, and wondering if why aren't we servicing Burbank Airport?
So that brings us to one of our 2014 projects we're working on. The City of Glendale serves on a task force for what we call Bus Rapid Transit, which looks at higher speed transit lines that do more community interconnectedness. We've been looking at kind of what we call the east-west corridor, or the missing link, or the Burbank-Glendale-Pasadena service corridor, to see how many people are traveling between the cities and what that connection would be, mostly along the 134 freeway. We are probably about halfway through our current study with Metro. Metro's the lead agency on this. We've identified a couple of routes that we're looking at to make that corridor connection. And what's probably the most interesting is the City of LA DOT runs Commuter Express 549. It's a route that runs from the West Valley, San Fernando Valley, into Pasadena. And we're looking at the riderships, the ons and offs, for who's getting on in Glendale and where are they going, and who's coming from these different areas and getting off in Glendale and where are they going. People aren't riding between the three cities. People are really coming from the West Valley, from Reseda, all the way along that 101 corridor, and coming into Glendale for work. Or if they are in Glendale, they're going to Pasadena to work. So the travel patterns are really different and interesting when you try to link the three cities together. So we just have preliminary data on that process, and we're still looking at digging in and working with Metro to say, how can we do that corridor, and does it become at some point a rapid bus service? Do we enhance the current commuter express service to bring it up to kind of a more rapid frequency? Or at some point, can we build enough ridership along that corridor to look at a light rail, which is what we had talked about probably back in 1990, of a Gold Line extension from Pasadena here into Glendale, Burbank to the airport. So that includes airport options to try and make those linkages to make it easier. So you would take a beeline to the commuter express that would take you to that.
Makes sense.
It's all based on money, so it's wherever the money comes from is what we could build.
Thank you.
My pleasure. What I thought we'd do is a quick little run through of the routes just to familiarize yourself. We provided a set of schedules for you to take with you. But I thought these were helpful to just kind of get a picture as to where our service is and what it's running and what types of neighborhoods that we are serving with the routes. The data that we're providing is from 2013. The maps are from our last demographic study, which is 2008. So the maps and the routes are still the same. And they'll be updated as part of our fall study that we're doing, so the demographics may change. But you can see where each route is operating, and the darker the color is the higher transit orientation. The lighter the color means people are probably less likely to ride, or their rides are discretionary in nature. So Route 1 runs north on Central, south on Brand, and you'll see we're doing about 25 passengers per hour during the weekday, and the cost per passenger is about $3.41. So when you look at what the average fare is on the Beeline at 62 cents, you can see that the passenger fare isn't paying for the total cost for whatever that one trip would be, but it's certainly a helpful and 18% part of our operating costs. So Route 1 serves downtown. Route 2 is just the opposite on the same loop, going north on Brand and south on Central. It has a little bit less ridership, and so its cost per passenger is a little bit higher.
Question. I noticed the orientation index. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how you came up with those categories and what kind of facts go into that to determine the orientation index? Is it ridership rates or home car ownership rates, socioeconomic status information?
The transit-oriented index, in this case what we call it, is income, density, whether or not that you have car ownership. And then we'll repeat the same process for this year and looking at the same kind of demographics. It's all census data that we say the people that are most likely to ride kind of come out of that core set of data that is provided through the census or through the American Community Survey.
Right. Does the ACS include data on public transit users?
Not specifically.
Okay. Would you consider using the 2010 census data to include that?
We use the 2010 census as our base, and then we update any dramatic changes with the ACS because there's nothing current in between. So we use the most recent the census data, and then any other data that we can get to kind of give us a clearer picture, a more complete picture up to date. Our Route 3 is our longest route, running from downtown out to JPL, and this is a kind of a combination of different things that happen on this line. Most of the ridership happens from downtown to the college, and so in our restructuring of service on Route 3, we continue to operate service from downtown up to JPL, but with less frequency above Glendale College. And we started a new route, Route 32, with some of that savings of hours into more rapid service or more frequent service in that downtown corridor. So because it is a short line, we call it a Route 32. So between Glendale College and downtown, you could ride a 3 or a 32 bus that will stop along the same stops along that section of the route. La Cañada Flint Ridge operates the LCF shuttle, and that operates just on Foothill Boulevard to the Montrose Shopping Park. So it runs on top of the 3. So if you're in that La Cañada area, you could ride a 3 or a 33 bus. The 34 bus we just put in the afternoon for this peak school time to pick up the huge loads. So we have 5 high schools up in La Cañada on Foothill Boulevard, and our 3 and 33 buses aren't able to handle everything, so they pay for extra service in the afternoons to get students home. It's interesting, our ridership on Route 33 and 34 is very light in the mornings. Most parents are dropping their kids off at school, but all the kids are taking the bus home. So at 3 o'clock, it's craziness up on Foothill Boulevard. So when we talk about Route 3, in the big picture, it's the whole service from downtown to JPL, but it does have some different segments depending on where we're running and what day of the week.
Okay. Catherine, I have a question about Route 3, I guess now is 332. There's no more service then from Glendale? Well, Well, let's get that question. There's no more service from Glendale College area down to downtown Glendale on the weekends?
No, Chairman Cuban, the 3 and 32 run so all 6 days a week. So
it does go southbound?
yes.
Okay, so
32 runs between downtown and the college, and 3 runs right on top of it. It just goes farther up to JPL.
okay, so I guess the map is confusing to me. The actual schedule, where it has listed. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
So if I'm looking, so I'm not weekday. Weekday, I'm assuming it's Monday through Friday. We're looking at the Saturday, and I'm looking southbound to the Glendale Galleria. It's only showing me 31. Am I not reading that correctly?
Oh, okay. So our Saturday
Seeing
service.
that?
No, you're no.
Please tell me I can read the map, please, correctly.
Unfortunately, Chairman Jacobian, you and everybody else, this Route 3 has gotten very confusing. On Saturdays, Route 31 actually runs a different route from downtown to actually La Crescenta. So because it has a different orientation, and you'll see on the map it's got a little area where it goes off to the left, it only runs as far as Montrose on Saturdays. So it's a whole new route. It just runs between downtown and Montrose, and it veers off to La Crescenta Avenue and then comes back down to downtown. So we don't serve Foothill and the JPL area on the weekends, but we run up to the Montrose Shopping Park.
And it's southbound as well?
Yes, north and southbound.
So where would that
Saturdays.
be on this schedule?
So on the very far right will be the southbound, and you'll see it comes from Montrose, La Crescenta, all the way down Verdugo to the college, and then downtown to Harvard and Louise.
But then if you look underneath, it's saying Route 31 operates Saturday from downtown to La Crescenta only. Am I to understand that's the round trip when you're giving one direction of downtown to La Crescenta?
Right, downtown to La Crescenta, and then La Crescenta back down.
Okay.
It's just telling you what the origin and destination, what the ends of the routes are.
I see. Okay. Okay, thank you.
And there's no Sunday service, right?
No Sunday service on Route 3. We only have 3 routes that operate on Sunday. They're the downtown routes, 1, 2, and 4. And here we go with Route 4. You'll see this, Route 4 serves probably our densest, most transit-dependent neighborhood, circulating between the north part of the downtown area at the Galleria, down to Roosevelt School on the south end on Chevy Chase. This is one of our higher ridership lines, and you'll see our cost per passenger is under $3. On Route 5, you'll see we operate from Edison Pacific on the south to the Hoover Toll Keppel Complex up on Glenwood. And it serves kind of a mixed neighborhood of kind of a medium transit dependency during the middle area of the route. On Route 6 is Colorado Boulevard. It also has Metro service on Colorado for 2/3 of the route. It services mostly Glendale, or the Glendale High School, and also terminates at Edison Pacific on the west. Route 7 is our second longest route. It does just about a little bit of everything. It serves the Rancho area on the west, comes up to serve the San Fernando Road and Glen Oaks corridors in northwest Glendale, goes through the Hoover Keppel Toll School area, and then cuts across in order to serve Glendale College. So we have a lot of ridership, college students that live in that West Glendale portion that have been traveling to GCC on a regular basis. So even though the transit dependency in some of those areas isn't as robust, there's a good amount of college students that are using the service. It's the only true east-west service on our routes. Almost everything else goes north-south until you get down to Colorado.
So I was one of those students. taking the 7 to GCC from the west side. So will this fall's study include recommendations on bus stop locations? Because you just mentioned something about low ridership rates or low, based on your index, on the west side. But it seems like there are a lot of stops along Glen Oaks on that part of town. So will that be included in the study?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Bartosoff, we're looking at a number of things for Route 7, and as we look at every route and collect the data, we look at the planning data that's available to the city as well as what our current ridership is, and try and guess what those trends may be and where things may shift. We've had some requests to operate service up on Kenneth Road, and part of our data collection is going to be asking that question: if we were to move that part of the route to Kenneth Road, will that make it easier or worse for you to use that service? We have a lot of ridership, a lot of boardings along Glen Oaks. And in the past, years ago, we ran for a little bit of time upon Kenneth Road, and our boardings weren't as robust. So we need to find out for the people that are currently using the service of where are they walking to, how are they accessing the bus stops, and where are they coming to? Is the route really in the middle of that area where people are really riding? And that should give us some data to whether or not we would look at moving that route to another alignment. Right now we run on top of Route 92, which is Metro service. We try to do the timing so that you have a choice between either the Metro bus or our bus, but the routes are different lengths, and sometimes, they kind of catch up with each other. So we will look at, are there any underserved areas? Do any of the demographics change, that there's more pockets or more dependency that has developed in the last 5 years? And then try to make an educated decision then, is it a policy-based decision, or is it a fact-based decision where people really are boarding those buses? So we will be doing a lot of outreach as part of this process, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that as our study progresses. Our Route 11 bus, even though we have this laid over our demographics, most of the Route 11 riders come from outside the city, boarding from the Glendale Transportation Center at the bottom of your map. And then we basically take them from the Metrolink or Amtrak service and disperse them up through the city at job sites. We're looking at how we could speed up that service. Most people want to get off the train and get to work right away, and we're looking at if we have some underutilized stops, if we can speed up the time on those routes by taking some of the stops out or consolidating some stops.
Question. So looking at the map for this route, I understand all of the bus stops are included on the map, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
For the most part. We've added a couple in between.
Oh, okay. I'm curious about the jog that the bus does going southbound to Wilson, Glendale, and then jogs back to Colorado. If there's no bus stops along that section, why does it do that jog?
Commissioner Bartosoff, we have a couple of large employers along that route, City of Glendale being one of them. So this was the only way to really, because we can't travel on every street, we have to find streets that the bus can actually turn and make the orientation to be able to drop off folks at the right place. So this allows for commuters to get to both city facilities and the school district offices. And also we have a high school with the school district offices. It's interesting, there's a lot of folks that also use the bus to try and make other connections. Like we do have some riders that come from the train, will get on the bus, and then transfer to another bus along the route because they're really going either to Eagle Rock or farther east in Glendale than what this Route 11 bus does. So it pretty much gives everyone the connectivity to the major employer sites. Again, this may shift if we have new employers or different employers coming into town. Then we'll look at realigning the route to be able to get them fairly close to their destination.
So I guess my question is that I see one bus stop at Lexington and Brand, and the very next bus stop that it would stop at is Brandon, Colorado. So why doesn't the bus just go straight down Brand instead of turning on Wilson, Glendale, and Colorado?
In this case, the bus is going in the morning straight up Brand, dropping everybody in the downtown corridor, and then it circulates around to come east. So it's not a two-way trip on top of each other. It's really, this one's more of a little bit of a loop to get around town. In the afternoon, it starts up at Monterey and Brand, comes down through all the business, all the high-rise employers, then jogs, comes back through the middle of town before it goes down to the train station. So it's not necessarily a first on, first off, but it's trying to make it an intelligent way to either drop the most people off first thing in the morning and then loop around.
Thanks.
And then our Route 12 service runs between GTC at the bottom, the Glendale Transportation Center, through the Grand Central corridor on Flower Street, and then goes into the backside of the Burbank train station. There's the other service that would be the complementary service to this would be Metro service, the 94 or 794 that runs along San Fernando Road. This route only operates, and the Route 11 only operate during peak commuter times in the morning and the afternoon. So it's not on the road all day, but just doing those peak employment-based services. So one of the things that we are going to do for this next study as part of our outreach is to try and make sure we're capturing the non-rider information a little bit more robustly than what we have been able to do in the past. We're doing a number of online surveys. So we've actually joked, if you hate the bus, there's a survey for you. You can tell us why you hate it, if you used to ride it and you didn't like it, it's too slow, it doesn't go where you want to go anymore. If you do not like buses because they cut you off in traffic, you can tell us that. If you are someone that rode growing up, high school and college, you rode all the time, but now you've got your great job and a car, and now you don't need the bus as much. You can give us your perception of, did it suit your needs early on? What types of things could we do to make it more appealing to you? Should you want to use us as your second car, or use us as your first choice as a discretionary rider? We'll have surveys that if you are on a route, you're a resident, you're really not a bus rider, but you live by a route, you can tell us things about the bus stops and about the buses and service in your corridor, and whether you think the bus is on the right street or the bus stops are in the right places. So we're going to ask for a lot of feedback that will help educate us in ways that we can make some intelligent decisions about how we deploy the service to serve the most people in the most effective way in the corridors where people are really traveling. So that'll be new for us. We didn't do any electronic surveys last time, but with the development of online surveys and people's comfort with doing those surveys, we're hoping to get a little bit more information in a different way that we can kind of combine then with what we get from the riders that usually like to tell us what they like and what they don't like in riding the buses. So that brings us to some of our major efforts that we're doing for this fiscal year. The first thing, we're producing 10 buses. The buses just don't come out and show up on the shiny bus showroom and you just go, I'd like this model, please. Can you send me 10? We are actually required by federal law to monitor and manage the whole bus production system with whatever company that we have bid with. We're such a small agency, we do a joint procurement with other transit agencies. So we make them do a lot of the legwork on the specifications and take advantage of their knowledge. But we are required to work with them through that planning process up through the award of the contract and then the production. With New Flyer, they are located in Canada. They're a Canadian company that also has facilities in the United States. We are required by federal law to buy America. And there's only 2 or 3 bus companies left making full-size heavy-duty buses here in the States. So New Flyer has been certified by the Federal Transit Administration as a Buy America approved Altoona-tested heavy-duty bus for us. So we actually hire an inspection team. Transit Resource Center actually has somebody in Manitoba right now as they're building the frames for our buses. They look at everything from the welding, the seams, are there any rough parts where the wiring could get caught and fray through the process of building the buses or after they're out on the road. So in Manitoba, they actually do the frame for the bus, and then in St. Cloud, Minnesota, they actually do the assembly of the rest of the bus into the form of the bus that actually gets delivered to us. And so you'll see a couple of the picture on the right is they're doing the frame for the engine compartment before all of the engine materials are installed. It's interesting because as a public admin person and learning transit over the years, we're required to look at all the bus drawings and saying, how is it laid out? What are you approving? Where's your ADA compliance? How many seats are in there? How is your driver's panel all set up? So it's a real involved process of about 800 and something different specifications, technical specifications that we look at and make those choices. What color are the lights? What color is the stripe on the floor? What materials are used in the buses? What's amazing about these buses compared to where we were probably 10 years ago is the buses have tons of electronics on them. Everything that controls how the bus operates, the speed it maintains, our camera systems. We have 2 camera systems on every bus. Our fare boxes, all the engine diagnostics now are electronic. So we're not only hiring mechanics that can turn a wrench and change brakes, but we have to have mechanics now that have the technology components to be able to test out the air conditioning systems, the electrical systems, the communications between the head signs and the fare boxes. It's more complicated than the most whiz-bang car that we have on the roads right now. So it's interesting to learn that and to be part of that process all the way through. So it's about a year process by the time you start to buy a bus to the time it's delivered. We are going to work on our real-time information, and part of our survey that we're doing out with our study this fall is giving folks a chance to talk to us about our bus stop signs and whether or not this will be an effective tool for them to get their real-time bus information. This is a prototype of our sign that we're using. We're already making changes to it so that the stop number isn't as big as the route number and confusing anyone. But it'll have on there whether you want to call 511 or use your PDA. We'll also be collecting data of how many people have smartphones or access to phones actually at the bus stops. We think that percentage has gotten to be very high, and that this would be the most effective for us to be able to provide that real-time route information where we don't have resources to actually post schedules and maps at every bus stop. We have about 500 bus stops in town, and we don't have the resources to be able to staff those or be able to provide those kind of resources at those bus stops. So we're trying to see if this will kind of take us to that next step. So we'll be testing that sign design and then going out to bid for the fabrication and installation later this year. We're doing our route analysis. We're going to start collecting data in the middle of October. The data collection process takes a couple of weeks. We do weekday and weekend surveys. We do what we call as 100% count. So someone rides the bus, 2 people actually ride the bus all day long for all of the service, count every body that gets on and off, every bike, every wheelchair, makes notes of, is the driver running along with traffic, or is the driver going slow because there's too much time in the schedule? Is there real traffic congestion, like around the on-ramps for the freeways, that the bus is sitting through multiple light cycles before it can proceed on the route? So we're going to try and collect all of that data real time as a snapshot, kind of a one-day snapshot on every route of what's actually happening on that route that we can use then to kind of base where we're going to take the service or the frequency of the service. So our analysis takes a few months to actually take all that data and all the city data for where we're building, our new downtown development, what other employers are coming into town. We take all of that, kind of mix it together to come up with some recommendations. And that will probably come back to TPC next spring. And then our last project that we're working on is trying to get all of the paperwork and approvals to build a new bus maintenance facility. If you ever have the chance, you need to go down and see our current bus yard. Yard being that there is really no yard. We have a building and a couple of driveways. Most of our buses park on the street at night. We wash our buses by hand with a hose and a bucket and a broom. Most transit agencies have an automated bus washer. You drive it through, it all comes out nice and clean and dry and pretty. You can see on the bottom left-hand side, we have buses kind of in a drive aisle in the back of our shop building. The bus on the left is really up on jacks, and you'll see it on the right-hand side. We only have one bay to repair buses inside the facility. The other one is on portable jacks outside. So this is how we repair buses. It's usually at night, in the rain, in the dark, with some clamp-on lights. And you've got a $500,000 bus sitting up on some stilts. And we're able to do this very well. But it isn't the best circumstances and the best way you want to maintain and effectively protect your fleet. So we have funding for the facility. It is currently at the State Office of Historical Preservation for approvals as part of our environmental review. We're hoping that's taken a few months at this point. We're hoping that we'll hear back in the next couple of months to resolve any environmental concerns that they have. As part of our federal regulations, we have to reach out to every group and make sure that we have that we're building on property that doesn't have any historical or archaeological interest for other groups. And once that's done through the environmental process, then we should be able to work with Mr. Galani and staff to revise and finalize the design and look at doing construction. So we're hoping in a couple of years we have a facility that's appropriate for the fleet and would help us maintain the fleet on a more, we're doing our regular basis, but doing kind of a higher caliber, a little bit safer environment in which to do our service. And with that, that's how we're going to keep busy this next year. We invite you to come right along to test out your PDAs on the next time arrival and be happy to answer any questions. And we'll involve you as we go through the survey process to provide your input and get the show on the road for the next 5 years.
Any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have yes, please. Where is the site for the new facility?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Gonzalez, the city owns 2.5 acres of property adjacent to the Glendale Transportation Center. It sits back on the very end, very south side of Gardena Avenue. So we already own the property, and we have some master plan of that area for what type of facility we would need and what type of buildings we would put in.
So has there already been a facility program put together for the new facility?
Yes. Was
that done with a consultant or in-house or?
Actually, it's been a process over a number of years. We've had an architect that's done trans facilities and folks that do bus maintenance facilities. We had an original plan back in 2003. That unfortunately is out of date and out of code at this point. Since then, we've changed a little bit of our program for how the facility would be set up and try to make it a little bit more useful for us and for the size of the fleet and the type of service we are doing. So we do have a master plan with a maintenance facility with 4 bus bays. We have a circulation plan for on and off the property, how that would work, and a building for administration and for operations for the bus operators. So we have a conceptual master plan that was done with consultants and with our knowledge of what our system is. And now we just have to go back and finalize for a formal set of bid documents.
What's the order of magnitude of the project costs?
Our grant funded project right now is $12.1 million. It's in our this year's CIP project for the city budget.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the commission?
I have a question. So in the analysis that's going to be done this fall and through the spring, will there be consideration for the new development that's happening downtown, where those buildings are not currently online? Some are not yet. Will that be part of the analysis? And aside from that, is there outreach being done to those new residents to let them know about the Beeline system?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Bartosoff, we have a couple of pieces that we're trying to implement as part of this study. We obviously know what projects are in the development process and that at some point about 2,000 residential units will be built over the next few years. Transit's one of those things that if we build it, they don't necessarily come. So we have to build the density first and the desire for the transit system in order to have it be cost effective. We currently have capacity on our downtown routes to accept those riders that would be coming online as part of the new residences. But as a related piece to that, we're working with the planning department and with development services to try to get to the leasing offices. So we would have a transit component as part of their lease package to be able to get some of that demographic data from them, and also where they're living. I mean, obviously we know where they're living, but where they're working, to see if there is a transit nexus. Like, are they working and living in town, or are they living here but they're going out to Warner Center? Which isn't something Beeline's going to help them, but we can see what their travel needs are and then try to connect them to that east-west corridor, should that come through a little bit more robust. So we're working with planning and the development services to see how we can connect with those leasing offices and doing a survey with them. So as they come online, we get more data with who they are and what their transit tendencies are going to be for them.
Just to piggyback on what Commissioner Barsoff said, in the apartment industry, there's new terminology called rail volutions, because most apartment developers want to be next to rail train stations. And looking at our routes, Route 12 has the most cost per trip, $5.16. And also the one that's going to Route 11, it's also fairly high. That means the rail is not being used as effectively as apartment developers hope so. So in going back to his question, we hope that they'll be using the Beeline and the train, but the question, why aren't they using it?
Commissioner Kirkjian, you're asking kind of one of those tough transit questions, and I'll have to give you what I understand it to be. You have to have well-paying jobs in your city for people to be able to afford to ride Metrolink. The cost of a Metrolink pass is pretty expensive. So you have to have a real need. You either have to live way out of the area, and so there's a time advantage to take the train, assuming that you have an employment here in Glendale. That's who we have riding the train for the most part now, are people coming into Glendale from Riverside, from Oceanside, from Antelope Valley, Calabasas. So it's easier for them, rather than being on the freeway, to take the train in with an employment center that's here in Glendale. If we don't have a lot of Glendale residents that live in Glendale that are taking the train to go into downtown Los Angeles, or that are taking the train to go out to some of the other areas, because the employment density doesn't seem to be as robust out there as far as big groups. that it's still easier if you're living here and driving to those other areas, it's still easier to drive than it is to take the train. So that's another example of if you build it, did they necessarily use it? Yeah. There has to be other circumstances, either financial or time, or I can't stand sitting on a freeway any longer, that forces people out of the car into the train bus connection.
I think the new building, apartment building that's built at Colorado and by the freeway could be a good test for us, see how many % of those occupants are using Beeline or the train, for that matter.
Right. They do have transit service in front of their building with Beeline, and they have service with Metro right in that neighborhood, so certainly within walking distance. So that'll be part of that study is, if they're living here, where are they working and what is that connection? We are working on some projects with the planning department for some transit-oriented development studies. We have a Tropico and a South Glendale plan that is being done as far as a community plan. And we're looking at if we were to do some additional transit-oriented development, what would that be? And is it residential? Or in my case and suggestion is it employment? So can someone get off the train and go to work because we've developed research and development facilities or something else that make Glendale kind of a job core outside of the Grand Central corridor. So it's one of those, do we build the jobs and have people come to Glendale for the jobs, or do we have people that are residents here use the train or the bus system to get to their jobs? If we're doing it right, we have both. But that's a longer process to develop both.
Another question, are animals allowed on the Beelines?
Service animals are allowed on the Beeline, and that is everything from a service dog to a service pony, or a service snake, or a service tarantula, or a service monkey. As long as they are service animals, we allow them on the vehicles. The owners have to be in full control of their service animal, no matter what it is, and be fully responsible to take care of that animal and anything that animal does. Our most common service animal is a dog at this point, though other transit systems have experienced other types of service animals. We are regulated by a federal law to accept any kind of service animal. So it cannot be your pet unless your pet is in a carrier, and you can take your pet to the vet if it's enclosed in a carrier. But your service animal has to perform a service for you that enables you to ride the bus.
Another question, in terms of liability, to what extent is the city liable for an accident or a fight that broke off or something that happened in a bus? And are we self-insured or are we insured by an insurance company?
I can answer that, or I can have our city attorney also assist us with that.
The answer is it depends.
To be a little bit more clear, the way our system is set up, we contract with a third-party operator, in this case with MV Transportation. They fully indemnify the city for operation of the bus service. So if we have someone that slips and falls on a bus, or if we were to have a collision with a passenger vehicle, MV would be the agency that would process those claims. And we have it separated from the city for that purpose, for the insurance purpose.
That's actually good.
And if we have time tonight, or there is interest, Madam Chair, on our safety and security, most collisions are people running into the bus. It's not the bus hitting other folks. We do have some videos that we brought with us if you would like to see a couple interesting things from the driver's perspective. We have a few quick clips if there's interest and time allows.
So,
Is that a yes?
yes, I'd love to see that, yeah.
So on our buses, we have 2 camera systems, and I'm able to show you one camera system. This is called Drive Cam, and it is set up on the front windshield of the bus and faces out the front. And then there's the same camera faces inside the bus all the way to the back. And you'll see a couple of images that come up. We also have our surveillance system on the bus. It has between 5 and 7 cameras. Our new buses have 7 that show each direction of the bus, inside the bus, but also outside the bus, headed back. So you see the sidewalk. If people say, gosh, the bus passed me up, we can see whether or not they were actually at the bus stop. All of that is recorded, but the software system doesn't allow us to take snippets out and play them for you. So the Drive Cam, I think, will do well. So we're going to start with Edvin. So this is the, it'll take a second here to pop in. So this is the Drive Cam. The image on the left is what the driver sees out the window. The image on the right is the interior camera that faces back, so you can see what happens to passengers on board. I heard a couple of snickers, so it tells me someone saw. So I'm going to stop and replay this one because they're really short. And enlarge this image. So this is the driver view. We're going across Flower towards Sonora. And you'll see the left-hand side are people queuing up for the left-hand turn. And not only do you have one car cut into in front of the bus, but 2. And this is very typical that drivers aren't always paying attention to whatever is around them and don't realize that the bus is 14,000 pounds and bigger than they are. So I'm going to show you Jerry. And Jerry's a similar one where another car is driving off. I'm just going to show you the big. So Jerry's in control of his lane. Oh no, but this other car wants to be in the same lane as he does. Okay. This is common probably 100 times a day for every bus, every operation.
It's common for Prius drivers too.
And this is Marat. And Marat's bus is running along Foothill Boulevard. So it's not just Glendale drivers, it's also La Cañada drivers.
Oh, boy.
Did anybody catch that?
I didn't.
So I'm going to stop it as we go through. So she's driving eastbound on Foothill Boulevard, gets to a signal. What's great about Drive Cam, if you look, it's hard to see in these, the signals are green, and you can see the green signals on the image. So you say, okay, well, it's a solid green. It's not like it didn't turn green. It's a solid green. And you'll see that car starting to nose out. Okay, so this is what the driver's saying. The green light is totally green, and this car is turning right on a red in front of a bus hauling down Foothill Boulevard. And oh, they expect the bus is going to stop and let them turn. Okay. So Marat did a great job on safe driving on that one. We're going to go to Rolando. And let's see. Rolando is on Pacific. Oh, there's a car that pulls out right in front of him. So let me back this up and stop it. Okay, so Rolando's going south on Pacific towards Glen Oaks, and you saw that car just turned left. It's really making a U-turn. But if you watch the car, it just makes a U-turn. It never really slows down as it comes back out on Pacific. So it makes its left. You can see its little tail lights. It's making its left as you're finishing the U-turn and pulling right back out into traffic. And let's see. I think we'll do Daniel for our last one. And this happens quite a lot, and it talks about why we like to have far side bus stops. Daniel's in the right-hand lane. He's going to turn the corner, and oh no, this car wants to turn right in front of him. We get a lot of right turn. We get a lot of right turn collisions on the front of our buses where passenger vehicles don't want to wait for the bus to move and think that they want to turn right from that inside lane. And we have most of the collisions are these kind of collisions where they're catching the front bumper of the front side panel of the bus to try and turn right around it, or they're rear-ending the bus because the bus is too big and they can't tell it's there. It's amazing to us the stories and the explanations we get from people, whether they're cutting across 3 lanes to turn right, but this would be a normal day for a bus operator to be out there managing the passengers on board the bus, managing a $500,000 piece of equipment, and all of the drivers that are in their universe around them. And we have very few collisions. Our safety record is really outstanding for collisions that are our fault.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Engel. That was quite a presentation. I'm ready for Beeline 102 after that, and I'm looking forward to that report in March. Thank you again for all the time you put into that. That's very informative.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anush, what's up? What's next?
Item 6 is commission staff comments updates.
Any comments?
Nothing from staff, Madam Chair.
Nothing from staff. Anybody? Commissioner Sahakian, do you have any?
Well, I want to welcome our fellow commissioners, new energy. So don't be shy. Any questions, feel free. I'll give you my cell phone number off the air a little later.
Very good. I actually wanted to just touch base very briefly. Mr. Golanian, I had spoken with you a couple weeks ago. I'll bring up the issue that I found extremely troubling for those of you familiar with the eastbound travel on Mountain heading toward the freeway on-ramps, the 2 north and the 2 south. In the mornings, approximately 7 to 8 o'clock, there's a lot of traffic, people trying to get on both freeways, but especially the 2 south. What's been happening is a backup of cars, and as you know, that right lane hugs the side of the mountain to get onto that on-ramp. It's kind of blinding as you're going even below the speed limit, trying to follow that road, that lane. You all of a sudden run into a wall of cars, and all of that right lane traffic is waiting for the green light because there's no turn on red at that light to get onto that freeway. So there's a hazard there. There's a hazard which I noticed this morning. It happens every time this year, around this time of year, and that's the blinding sun that comes over that mountain and strikes the driver in the eye as they're making their way around that mountain turn. So I had brought up the idea because what's happening is there's a lot of people that would like to use that carpool lane who are stuck in that one lane of traffic. And what's happening currently is they try to bypass that entire right lane of traffic and then illegally make a right turn onto the freeway just to get into that carpool lane, which is mostly free. But it is going to create a hazard for people who are doing that illegally, and then the person who is acting legally, who's in that lane, and then trying to get into that carpool lane. So there's accidents kind of ready to happen in that situation. I had mentioned it to you. I know you had noticed something else on Glendale Avenue. I guess my question is, if you've looked into it at this point, what is the possibility of creating a second lane that would allow a right turn, carpool only, with a going straight as well? And is that something that would be permittable? Is that something Caltrans has to be involved in? And what's your take on that?
Chairperson Yakubian, thank you for sharing your concern. I have brought that to staff's attention. We have actually started working on redesigning the signs as well as the striping. Restriping to allow right turn movement onto the carpool lane. The person that we have worked with in the past at Caltrans has moved on to another area. So we are in the process of finding the right person to speak with and bring this up. But the design is done. Our principal traffic engineer actually is reviewing the design that's been prepared. And the next step will be to consult with the Caltrans. Our initial sense is that they will not have an issue with it. It's just that we have to find the right person so we don't wait in queue to get a response from them.
Very good, thank you.
If I may, please, I share the chair's concern on that. I take that route all the time, heading to go south on the 2. So what is the proposed solution? I missed it. If you're driving east, I know you cannot make a right-hand turn from 7 to 9 in the morning. And it's very interesting because the line is stalled because there are very few people, if any, coming from the east to make a left-hand turn. So what is the proposed solution to avoid the potential accidents?
Chairperson Yakubian, Commissioner Gonzalez, so the initial, and this is the offer we're going to make to Caltrans, that we completely eliminate that no right turn on red for the lane, the middle lane, the number 2 lane that will use the carpool lane. So if you are allowed legally to use the carpool lane, you can just go up the number 2 lane and make your right turn onto the freeway to south without having to wait in line to get to the...
And that's going to present
Another problem.
another problem, yeah, exactly. With the signage, I'm hoping will be very clear, and the police have a nice, comfortable bush to be hiding behind because there will be perhaps some people who take advantage of that.
Absolutely. There'll be 2 sets of signs, one at the near side and one at the far side, and these signs are enforceable, obviously, and
Very good.
we'll have to enforce them.
So if I may, just to understand there, you have lane number 1, which is at the center of the road,
Right.
lane number 2, and then lane number 3.
Right.
So lane number 3 will still be stopped,
Correct.
and lane number 2 will get on to the
Carpool lane.
to the carpool lane, even if there's a red light.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So the backup on line number 3 gets pretty deep also. So that lane will not be able to turn right on red.
Commissioner Gonzalez, we are also considering the preemption for the southbound lane on Mountain to trigger the red when there is traffic turning onto 2 South, Freeway 2 South, coming southbound, as opposed to even when there is no traffic, the red comes on, you can't turn. We're going to make it be triggered by the southbound traffic if there is any vehicles who want to make the left turn onto the South Freeway. Does that make
Coming
sense?
from the east.
Coming from Camino San Rafael.
Yeah.
So unless there is traffic coming that direction, you won't have a red. You will have green even on the number 3 lane.
Oh, okay. Okay, that will make that move a little quicker and avoid some accidents.
That's our objective.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no more...
I have
Go
a
ahead.
comment, please, under, we're number 6, I believe.
We're on staff.
Yeah, I wanted to see if we could get concurrence with the notion of having a speaker here from Metro. I was quite impressed with the discussion about the B-line and the communications apparently that goes on with Metro. But one of the things that I thought might have an interest with this commission was to see how, and I think you alluded to it earlier, about some studies that were done a while back, either through Tri-City Connection or something, to get a better connection to the light rail system in our county. And with the concurrence of the commission, I would like to invite a speaker from Metro who has a lot of knowledge about some of the history and is interested in potentially coming to speak, subject to his schedule. And his name is Doug Failing. I don't know if people know Doug or not.
Good friend.
He's a good friend, yeah. Knowledgeable individual, but is that a level at Metro, and he has the desire to get a better connection to the light rail system for our city. And while I know money is an issue and a lot of other things that relate to that are issues relative to policy, it would seem to me that given the population of our city and the remoteness that we have now relative to the light rail connection, that it might be worth getting some initial information from him and maybe potentially take some steps after that.
I think that's a fine idea. Perhaps you can then work with staff to at least present some times and looking at our schedule, making sure it's at an appropriate day when we're not necessarily swamped and we can enjoy what he has to say.
So tentatively, next schedule, I'll work it out to see, but I think our next scheduled meeting is the 28th of October.
That's right.
And if that would be possible, I would like to make that invitation. I'm working with the staff now based on the chair's request.
Chairperson Yakubian and Commissioner Gonzalez, for October 28th, as of today, we don't have any items for that evening.
Okay.
So we'll be more than happy to make the arrangement
Okay, good.
for Mr. Failing to do the presentation.
Good. He's checking on his calendar as we speak, but it was subject to Commissioner's concurrence. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do have one question, and maybe we can discuss it at the next meeting. San Fernando Road and Broadway, there's a set of K-rails at the west leg of the intersection, and I see you're laughing. Can we get some information on that? I'm familiar with the intersection and with the disagreements with the City of LA, but for my colleagues, I think it would be very beneficial to educate them on that.
Absolutely. If you like, I can give you a brief explanation. As you're aware, Madam Chair and Commissioners, so this was a Metrolink managed project. The intersection of Broadway and Brazil, Metrolink and City of Glendale and City of Los Angeles initially had started with a joint project. Due to some disagreements, City of Los Angeles decided not to move forward with their leg of the project. Metrolink and City of Glendale have already completed all the improvements at the railroad crossing and within the City of Glendale. And for about 20 minutes, we attempted to open up the intersection to traffic, and it was extremely confusing, even with police enforcement. So we had to immediately close it, and we realized that without the improvements completed on the City of Los Angeles side, there was no way we can make this work. And hence we decided, for at least on a temporary basis, to block off the intersection with K-rails. My understanding is that the City of Los Angeles has already bid out the project on their side, and they intend or anticipate to start the construction in January of 2014. It's a 6 to 7 month project, so by the summer of 2014, all the improvements within that side of the City of Los Angeles should be completed, and we can open up the intersection. If you need more details, I'll be more than happy to bring it back next month.
In the meantime, what I suggest we do, especially for the northbound left turn pocket, if we can drop some epoxy, some Q markers versus the orange cones, because it is a maintenance issue. They're all over the place. There's a lot of truck traffic. I wasn't aware that it's going to start in January. That's a long time. So, and then January is probably June of 2014. So.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Golanian. And the last thing.
Sorry, I have some comments, just real brief. First of all, I'm very glad to be here. I'm excited about the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to working with commissioners that have been here and the new ones, bring in some fresh ideas. So thank you very much. One very specific concern that I have is Monterey Road between Geneva and the freeway on-ramp for the 134 going westbound. I am involved in the community gardens alongside Monterey, and the 5 years that I've been involved in that project, there have been 3 accidents relating to our property and drivers along that street. And I think it talks a little bit about the speed at which people are traveling on that street and the dangers of that curved road. And I know that, Mr. Galanian, you've talked to me personally about some improvements that may be coming along that corridor. So I'd like to see if there's an update on that project, any information that you can give us to help me stop worrying about the safety of our gardeners.
Chairperson Yakubian, Commissioner Botrusov, we do have a Monterey-Glendale intersection improvement project. It has been in the works for a while. As part of that project, we intend to acquire some property from the church. I don't recall the specific name of the church that's at the intersection, so that we can realign the Glendale-Monterey Avenue better. And unfortunately, it's taken a while to establish contact with them. They have a trustee board, and we've been going back and forth. That's the holdup currently. We do have a consultant on board ready to move forward with the design. My hope is that this week, if not this week, then definitely next week, that we will have a direct sit-down with the Board of Trustees, and we'll hash this thing out, and we can move forward.
Okay, great. And then my other question was about the several plans that have been passed in recent years and projects that we're working on, particularly the Bicycle Master Plan, Safe Routes to School, Greener Glendale Plan, that includes transportation elements in it. I'd like to just have an update, of course not now, but maybe in future meetings, about what the implementation of these plans involves, what our city is going to look like in a couple of years as we implement these plans. And hopefully this commission will be involved in trying to prioritize those projects in those plans. So I'm hoping that this can be a very active commission and that we can work with you on developing those plans.
Absolutely.
That's it. Thank you.
Any other comments? No? Thank you. Okay. Arish, what is the next thing on there?
Item 7, adjournment.
Do I hear a motion?
Second.
Second. Thank you.